Hey everyone, Warrax here. So I was going to do a video on Guardian Druid, and as I sat down for 10.1, doing a guide, and as I sat down and kind of wrote out the script and did some dry runs of kind of just how I wanted it to sound and things like that, I've noticed that I kept getting into tangents on the spec itself. And so in order to try and keep both try to keep the guide as clean as possible for the purposes of giving information, I decided I wanted to go ahead and actually make a second video, which is this one, that basically talks about the start of, or the state of Guardian Druid as we're in 10.1. This has kind of been inclusive of the fact that there was a great video by Tactics here on YouTube that I'll link in the description below that talked about some of the problems, or so to speak, that are out there with Guardian Druid, particularly in its talent trees, and we'll kind of echo some of that in this video. Pumps' 10.0.5 State of Guardian Druid video, which holds up, and then also here is on this one is the why you should and shouldn't play Guardian Druid video that Pumps wrote here in patch 10.1. And so it's one of those situations where I kind of felt like, after kind of looking at all of this, I kind of wanted to talk about what I feel is some of the fundamental problems of Guardian Druid as I click this light on real quick. And so what I want to do is kind of go through the things that I feel like are plaguing the spec itself. And we're going to kind of use a combination of things here, mainly talking about the why you shouldn't play Guardian Druid section. But even then, it's like we're just really going to touch on the headlines here. So I want to break this down into a few different sections. The first one that I want to do is on the kind of core kit itself. And then we'll talk about the talent trees. And then we'll kind of talk about the general community perception that is also it's kind of a major issue for the spec. But then just kind of the fact that the philosophy behind the design of Guardian Druid. So what I want to do first is start by just looking at the baseline abilities of Bear. And on the whole, one of the things that you'll notice if you play a lot of other tanks is that all of the abilities matter. And yes, I'm in Tier Guard because I love this music, and my frame rate is fine here, actually, unlike in Valdrakken right now for some reason. Anyways, if you'll notice playing other tanks that there's a lot of synergy built into the kit, and it's what I like to call everything drives something else. And in Guardian Druid's case, that is not true. So I'm going to use Prop Paladin and Brewmaster Monk and Blood DK because those are the three other tanks that I'm the most familiar with. When you look at a Prop Paladin, you look at every single ability that they do, it drives something. Whether it's building holy power, giving you a defensive and damage component in Consecration, defensive damage component in the case of Shield of the Righteous. Hammer of Wrath is a big execute ability that has a health condition on it, which is cool. It just has everything in the core kit does something. Judgment makes your next holy power spender deal more damage, that sort of thing. When you look at Brewmaster Monk, you have Keg Smash, you have that enables your Breath of Fire, which combines your two abilities into giving you a nice DR and a healthy chunk of damage. You have your Tiger Palm reducing the cooldown on your brews. You have Spinning Crane Kick giving you shuffle up time, and Elusive Brawler proc being procced off of Blackout Kick. So as you can see, everything does here. And then Heart Strike generates RP. Marrow Rend is your offensive and defensive ability there. Death Strike, offensive and defensive. Blood Boil enables your plagues, which then continue towards the leech healing that you get overall on the spec. So as you can see, there's a lot of interconnectivity in amongst the specs. What is it that Guardian Druid gets? You get 3 stacks on Thrash, and Mangle does 20% more damage against bleeding targets. That's it. Moonfire, you have to talent into and invest significant points into making it a big part of the kit. And Barkskin, same thing. You have to invest talents into making it. It's the only offensive and defensive capable thing you have, which is, you know, bark skin with brambles. It's not baseline, which is the way that the ability is built. And then you have swipe, which is, to me, the biggest culprit here, because it's considered the filler ability, but it's a filler ability that literally does nothing but fill time. So when you look at the filler abilities again, I'm going to go back to the tanks that I know. It's Blessed Hammer for Prop Paladin. Well, it generates Holy Power and gives you a small physical damage mitigation component. It's Tiger Palm, which reduces your bruise. It's Heart Strike, which gives you RP to enable other things in your kit. Swipe literally does nothing. They could give it a like 1 rage per enemy struck, and that would be infinitely better than what it does now. Like, that's how bad swipe is at this moment in time. And so I want to see them do something more. Can we, like, for example, this talent, Moonless Night, I actually think is a really cool idea. It just gets locked out because of other talents around it. Why not make this part of Moonfire baseline? You know, so Mound gives Mangle even more interactions, and it gives Maul interactions, and just have it proc off of anything that spends rage too. So, you know, let it proc off of raise, let it proc off of this, let it do reduced damage when it gets like swipe and thrash. Like, there's all these possibilities that could happen here that would allow it to just be, I think, a really fun talent that makes Moonfire an applicable ability to use no matter the build that you're using, and you gain both an offensive and defensive component out of it because you're getting Scintillating Moonlight, but now you're also getting this offensive component on top of the damage that you're getting. And it just adds a little bit of synergy and interplay with the kit, which means that in single target, for example, you'd want to really prioritize Mangle and Maul, versus right now you're just kind of dumping the rage as you need to, because you can eke out that little bit of extra damage. So just something that allows the kit to be more interactive with each other from an offensive standpoint. Defensively, it's a severe number of issues, but we'll kind of talk about that in a little bit. I just think that allowing swipe to generate something, and a certain talent like, this Moonless Night, or even something like Scintillating Moonlight being by default, I think would be great. Or make Galactic Guardian baseline. Something along those lines that just gives the spec a reason to have things. Right now, basically, Thrash and Maul interact with each other, and everything else feels bolted on. Like, they couldn't think of a way to make an enticing kit, so they just added a bunch of abilities and then tuned them to make it so that you had to use it. So from the offensive fundamental kit, we're there. Defensively, I don't think that Iron Fur is good enough. Like, 1 stack of Iron Fur increases my armor by 9,700. Right now, I'm getting 40% damage reduction, so I go from, 40% damage reduction. I don't think I can get enough here. Yeah, I go up to 20,000 armor, and I get 56% damage reduction against physical damage only. Like, that's just not good enough. Like, there is no reason that I should be only getting something against physical damage. And the diminishing returns on armor you saw there. I have 10,000 armor in bear form, and then I added another 9,500, but only gained 15% against physical damage. Like, it's just not good enough. It needs to do more. Something like Thorns of Iron is a good idea, but it's so kind of weird and bork that it doesn't matter. And I just don't think that it brings the value that it should. So defensively, the kit's kind of in a weird place because you have 1 active mitigation tool, and then you have 2 cooldowns in Bark Skin. It's actually pretty good. I think Bark Skin is in a pretty decent section, but as you can tell by my tooltip here in the bottom right, it's a 32-second cooldown because of Survival of the Fittest, which means that it has a weird cooldown timing. And Survival Instincts is a 2.1 minute cooldown, which makes it have a weird cooldown timing. So you can't even rotate these cooldowns in an effective way to be able to kind of maintain yourself, because you're just kind of hitting them when they come up, or you feel like you need them. And there's nothing there that allows you to have effective cooldown rotation, and there are other tanks that do this too. Like Brewmaster has basically no defensive cooldown. Vengeance Demon Hunter has like 1.5, and that are like fine, but aren't great. But you think of like the 3 best tanks right now, and that's Blood, Prot, and the Prot Warrior, Prot Boys, Warrior and Paladin. They all cycle through cooldowns really nicely. You IFTer into Ardent Defender, into Guardian of Ancient Kings, and then you can IFTer again, and then you can Ardent Defender again, and then you IFTer again. Blood, you get Vamp Blood into an Icebound, into an AMS, into, a Dancing Rune Weapon, which gives you some damage too, but offers a high amount of parry. Like, there's these really nice cooldown rotations so that you can kind of be somewhat aggressive in how you use them. Prot Warrior through Demo Shout, Last Stand, Shield Block. I don't know as much about Warrior, but I know that they have some nice cooldown cycling that they can do to kind of make themselves practically unkillable. Guardian Druid doesn't have that, and it's a noticeable gap when the 3 strongest tanks all have something in common, and that's they have good defensive cooldowns to cycle through, on top of having kits that allow themselves to have full interactivity. Like, the closest thing that any of those things has to swipe is maybe Blood Boil for blood. And even then, I would argue that it still does more than what Swipe does, because it activates your Blood Plague, is good for Snap Threat, actually does decent Snap Threat, and then also, like I said, Blood Plague, which increases the healing done from the ticking, so it enables the core defensiveness of the kit, which is self-sustain. So overall, I just don't think that the defensive kit really does well. It feels like there's something missing. The offensive kit doesn't have enough that it could explore. Like, it feels like almost like the core kits are all like basically just afterthoughts, and that's a problem. All right, so we're gonna move on from the core kits. I think I've talked enough about this. This is gonna be a long video, guys. I'm really sorry. Let's talk about talents. Now, Tactics did a great video. I'm going to recommend that you pause this, go watch Tactics' video, and come back. I agree with pretty much everything he says in that video, but I want to highlight some of the more interesting points that I think he made, and then also add 1 or 2 of my own that I haven't seen anyone else say. So I don't know if these are my idea solely, or if I'm going to be able to take credit for this. But in an effort like. So all of these trees have a shape to them. This is a bear paw. The problem is that from here on down, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 talents below the 20-point gate. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. There are 25 points above the 20-point gate, but 18 below the 20-point gate when you can only spend 10, and you have to 2-point into many of these. The tree's just imbalanced. It's just not balanced in a way that is really done. Luckily, this is easy to fix, and Taxis talks about this, and that is cutting down 4 points in this tree somewhere. I think you could do it in a number of ways. I think you take Fury of Nature and make it a point. Scintillating Moonlight is 1 point. Flashing Claws is 1 point. Balance the numbers, make them just a flat 10% across the board, or 20%, or whatever it needs to be. That saves up 3 points. So an example in this build, what does that open up for me to get? If I'm all of a sudden saving a point here, now I can grab Vicious Cycle. Or I can grab Moonless Night for Tyrannical Weeks. I can grab Raise for AoE purposes. The other thing that you can do is take this row, Reinvigoration, Vulnerable Flesh, Layered Main, Survival of the Fittest, and make it all 1 point. Now all of a sudden in this build, I can grab a 1 point Fury of Nature. I can grab Raise. I can grab a 1 point Flashing Claws. I can grab a Vicious Cycle. Or I can even grab a 1 point Reinvigoration. Or I can go get Infected Wounds. Or I can get Ursoc's Endurance. Or I can get a second charge of Survival Instincts. It just allows the tree to be opened up and really kind of flourish and have a way without having to do massive restructuring to it. There are still fundamental pathing issues, and Tactics talks really well about all of those, so I'm going to recommend that. But just by doing something simple like cutting this row all down to 1 point and cutting these 3 talents down to 1 point, like, it just allows that tree to really flourish. Even just cutting these 4 down, like in this build, all of a sudden I can grab Fury of Nature with 2 points, raise, and then grab something like Vicious Cycle, or grab a second charge of Survival Instincts, or grab Moonless Night, that all empower the build. And I feel like I pretty much have almost everything that I would want in this style of build, which is more arcane, laser bear, and plus focused. So like, it just allows a little bit more freedom of choice, and then it allows also for flexibility. You know, am I in a mass AoE fight, you know, that's a lot of physical damage that Ironfur does a good job of mitigating? Maybe I drop a second charge of Survival Instincts to grab Thorns of Iron. Or, you know, I grab, say, a point out of race to get a point in reinvigoration to allow me to get, you know, that 10% or 20% Frenzied Regen cooldown, which needs to come off the GCD. Let's step back and talk about Frenzied Regen. So Frenzied Regen needs to come off the GCD, and my argument is very simple. It gets compared to Word of Glory a lot. Prop Paladins can Word of Glory someone else. Like, that's why it's on the GCD. It can be used elsewhere. You know, and Blizzard has said before that they want tanks to, you know, that have this type of ability to choose between healing and damage. But they don't design their dungeons that way. They just don't. Frenzied Regen can only be used for the benefit of the tank. Allow it to be off the GCD, and allow Guardian Druids to have an emergency reactive gameplay loop. That's all I'm going to say on that. There's a longer conversation about it. But yeah, so just cutting out these 4 points I think would be a boon. Making all of these 1 point talent trees, and then allowing me to grab something like Raise, Moonless Night, Fury of Nature, something like that. Like, don't even have to cut these down to 2 point talent trees. I just think making this row all 1 point and making Vulnerable Flesh a talent that's actually worth a fucking shit would be lovely. Sorry for my language, but like, God, I hate this talent with a passion. Some other cool things, something like Front of the Pack I think would be better off used in the class tree. Just personally, like, you're never picking it here because Brambles and Mangle are just like too good, frankly. Speaking of the class tree, there's one major change, well, one that I think should be implemented, and then one bold change that probably is never going to happen, but would be really interesting if they did. And it involves Ironfur. So one thing I did is I pulled all of the other tanks, and let's look at how many points they have to implement to get their active mitigation. Prot Warriors invest 0 points to get Shield Block and 1 point to get Ignore Pain. Prot Paladins invest 0 points to get Shield of the Righteous and 0 points to get Consecration. Brewmaster Monk invests 1 point to get Shuffle, or 2 points to get Shuffle, and if you guess Purifying Brew is active mitigation, you know, 2 points there. Vengeance Demon Hunter invests 0 points to get both Metamorphosis and Demon Spikes. 0. This is Frailty, Firebrand. And this is just a better, gives Demon Spikes the parry chance. Okay, so if you argue that, okay, they invest 3 points, but even then, they still get the Demon Spikes aspect, the ability Demon Spikes baseline. Blood Death Knight spends 2 points to get Mirror End, which is their active mitigation because it gives them the Bone Shield. Guardian Druid spends 1-2 points to get it. But you have to wait a long time to get this. And before, when you only got Frenzied Regen, you'd have to invest 3 points to get to Ironfur. Now you're like thinking, oh my god, this is only 1 point. Blah, 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 blah. But it's also in the class tree. Everyone else gets it in their spec tree, and it's one of these talents up here. So what I'm going to say is Paladin has actually given us, I think, a really good idea of something that could be done. So you'll notice over here, I've grabbed the Holy Tree. I want you to look in here. Notice there's no, I mean, you have Blessing of Freedom, but when you look at the Ret Tree, oh look, there's a talent right here now that says Unbound Freedom, which gives you extra movement speed when you cast Blessing of Freedom on a friendly target. Gives you movement speed and gives them movement speed. So what this tells me is that they have the ability to tailor these class trees a little bit more towards individual specs. So here's my suggestion. Iron Fur stays as it is, where it is, for Balance, for Feral, and for Restoration Druid. However, for Guardian Druid, it's baseline, and you move this talent over in place of it, and make it 1 point. And you give Layered Mane its agility component back, because that was the big reason that Layered Mane was good back in Battle for Azeroth, where I'm hanging out now. And that's because you got agility based off of the Iron Fur stacks as well. So you gained damage and defense when using your Layered Mane. Now, it's not as direct damage as like Shield of the Righteous or Consecration, you know, or Shield Block or Death Strike or anything like that is, but you still gain damage. And the direction that Blizz has moved in with active mitigation is that every spec has a reason to use their active mitigation. You know, monks get sustain out of it, which covers their big gap. When you use Purifying Brew and you use, was it Sasalabim's teachings, which gives you 25% of the amount you purify, you heal for. Like, it covers their gap. And elsewhere on other tanks, this allows you to, you know, they're basically giving you a damage defensive hybrid ability. Guardian Druid is the only one that doesn't. So by giving Layered Mane its agility component back and putting it here, you also allow this tree to be switched up in a way that I think is really nice. And you do that by moving Blood Frenzy up here. Blood Frenzy is taken in almost every build. It is incredibly vital to our rage generation. And it being this far down the tree is painful. So moving Blood Frenzy here, and you can, you know, take something like Untamed Savagery and move it here and no longer choice node Rend and Tear. I think that would be like a fine component, because then you get Untamed Savagery, allows you to be a little more aggressive with like a raise build in Mythic Plus, which is going to be very valuable. And then you can also grab Raise, Rend and Tear, Ursoc's Fury, Flashing Claws. All of a sudden that build starts to feel a lot better to play as well, versus just having, you know, having to choose between Untamed Savagery and Rend and Tear. So overall, I think that's a change that needs to happen. It could definitely, hopefully equate that. I think that'd be really good. The bold suggestion is that you delete Heart of the Wild. It just doesn't do anything anymore for the spec. It was really nice in Shadowlands because it really tuned, it was like very much in line with the affinity row, but that stuff has kind of fallen by the wayside with these talent trees, and Heart of the Wild just feels like it doesn't do anything anymore. It's not a good button to press. It's an insanely long cooldown. I think it should have been a 1 expansion ability, and it dies. In its place, for Guardian Druid, put Hero here. Yes, I'm saying give a tank Hero, Bloodlust, whatever you call it. Makes Guardian Druid unique. Gives them something that's unique in a comp, which is one thing they lack. So I think overall, like, that's something with the talent trees. Now let's go back to this, why you should and shouldn't play Guardian Druid. The tuning issues, I think, have been long known. I mean, Guardian Druid got a 50% aura buff, and it literally brought them in line with everyone else. Like, that's how bad the tuning was at one point. All right. So one thing he does talk about here, Pumps does, is talking about Frenzied Regen as well. He says our limited toolkit has nothing like a final stand where you simply bubble taunt and be immune. Frenzied Regeneration has a disgustingly long cooldown. Correct. for how weak it is when you compare it to things like Death Strike, Word of Glory, Soul Cleave, Expel, Harm, Ignore, Pain. He literally pulled out everything. Like, quite literally, Death Strike is a 40 runic power cost. Word of Glory you get for free every 9 holy power you spend. Soul Cleave is baseline, and that doesn't even include Spirit Bomb. Expel Harm you literally get for free, leveling up. And then Ignore Pain is literally 1 point investment to get it. All of these have little to no cooldowns, and we're the only tank without a spammable form of self-healing, and using 2 charges of Frenzied Regen on basic things like melee swings, and then having to wait 30 seconds before being able to heal yourself just does not work in the current state of the game. 1000% agree with this, Pumps, and thank you for writing this. Frenzied Regeneration just needs to be rethought. I don't like his suggestion here where you use Frenzied, like you utilize a Rage to instantly heal because you're Rage starved already. I just want to see Frenzied Regen off the GCD and its cooldown lowered to 20 seconds. Like, they do that, I think it's fine. Alright, Lackluster tier bonus. I'm not really going to talk about that. It's fine. It's whatever. Missing Identity. Guardian brings nothing into the realm of tanks. Exactly, which is why I recommend Bloodlust. We don't excel in any aspect of tanking or bring anything unique to our raid group, which is quite disappointing with the potential from the talent trees. Most tanks either excel in an area or bring some sort of utility like Rallying Cry, Spell Warding, A-Bomb, AMS, AMZ. Raid buff is brought by other druids in raid, as generally most raids have multiple druids, whereas having multiple demon hunters or monks is much less common. In the past, we had Leader of the Pack, which was granted the party 5% crit and some small healing on crits, but this could be a nice group buff, potentially return like the Wind Fury totem, which would make Guardian feels like it's bringing something to the table. I've always ascribed Leader of the Pack should be a PV, it should be a feral talent, give them a little bit of utility, but there. Talent trees, we've kind of, as you can see, this is the thickest section. We've talked a lot about this already. We'll go from there. But let's stop and let's talk about the overall philosophy that Blizzard has. It has been noted in past interviews and in past blue posts that Blizzard is perfectly okay in seeing Guardian Druid as quote-unquote the beginner's tank. If you're someone that has literally never played tank before and you want to get into the role, they want you to see Guardian Druid as the tank that is the most easy to get into. Right now, I would actually argue against that. I think Prop Paladin is much easier to play. Its rotation is very straightforward. Get the whole 3 holy power, spend Shield of the Righteous, use whatever builder you have on cooldown. You don't have to do anything more, anything less. Now, is it like a situation where where it's like, oh, but it's like has a lot of complex cooldown usage and its utility is complex and stuff like that? Yes, there is a difference between a very experienced high level prop paladin and a brand new prop paladin, and I think that's good. A new prop paladin going out there and seeing an experienced prop paladin should be something that occurs in this game. You see it really with all the tanks. Guardian Druid, it's really hard to tell what a high level, quote unquote professional Guardian Druid, like someone like Pumps, for example, is doing any differently from me. You have to go digging. Like, you really have to know what you're looking for in order to in order to make that kind of comparison. It's very obvious when the other 5 tanks are good and when they're not, and what they're still learning. So I think there needs to be more skill expression involved in Guardian Druid, but it requires making the kit a little bit more complex, which Blizzard seemingly does not want to do because they see Guardian as the starter's tank. Now, that philosophy also kneecaps the spec, because you can't make the quote-unquote starter tank the most powerful tank, because then you push out all the other tank specs into the game in ways that are unhealthy. But it also means that you can't tune the spec in a way that it deserves. So what I want Blizzard to do, and what I'm begging them to do, is get out of the mindset that Guardian is the starter's tank. Almost every top-level tank player will tell you that Guardian Druid is not the tank that a new tank should be learning. Because while at a core level, it's not the most difficult tank to learn, What it is difficult is playing it. And it's not because it's hard. It's because you work harder to play it successfully. Now, some people like me, I'm a masochist. I love that type of thing. But you stick someone on Guardian Druid for a week and then give them a Paladin at the exact same eye level and give them that for a week, I guarantee you they come back and say, man, Paladin was easier. Why does Blizzard say this is the starter tank? But because they have this idea stuck in their brain, it kneecaps their ability to do anything fun and interesting with the spec. So Blizzard, get it out of your mind that Guardian Druid is the starter's tank. Like, the starter's tank should be literally whatever spec they find the most interesting. And let them play that. Do not try to push people into a spec. It's like saying Holy Priest is the starter healer spec. I couldn't play a Holy Priest for shit, but I learned Resto Druid really quickly. I still don't know how to play Holy Priest. It just is what it is. And Holy Priest is quote-unquote the easiest, and Resto Druid is always seen as one of the more difficult because it has to be a more proactive healer. But I feel much more comfortable healing on a Resto Druid than I do on like a Holy Paladin or a Priest. And it's because when I started healing, I just jumped in and started playing. So but if Blizzard had their way, I would have been playing Holy Priest as my first healer because it's the easiest one to heal on. So why are you doing that with tanks? You don't do it with healers. You don't do it with DPS. Otherwise, everyone would be a BM hunter. Like, it's contradictory to your own philosophies in other roles. Why does it apply to tanks and not to DPS and to healers? So you need to get that out of your mind and sit down and spend the time with someone that really understands or wants to understand the spec, truly understands what it can and cannot do, and sit down and soft rework this spec. I don't think it needs to be completely burned to the ground, though if you take that route, I'm not going to be upset. But I think there are a lot of fundamental things that need to be done with this spec that are going to take time, and it's going to take a lot of dev time to sit down and fix a lot of the stuff that goes on with this spec. And you have to do it without looking at this as, oh, if we make this too complex, people won't play it. The modern gamer is okay learning something that's more complex if it means that there is a reward at the end of it. Right now, Guardian Druid is the quote-unquote starter tank, but there's no reward for starting on Guardian Druid. We need to fix that. Anyways, guys, I'll probably title this as a Soapbox episode. State of Guardian Druid in 10.1. Overall, the tank itself, like, these problems are from someone that is an ardent lover of the spec. Remember that. I absolutely love Guardian Druid. It is still my favorite spec in WoW. I'm only not playing it because I'm a DPS in Raid, and I'm flexing to Raid needs right now. But I'm still playing this tank a lot in keys. I will be maintaining this Druid because it is still my favorite class. But, like, for most people, you're probably not going to notice many of these issues that I experience. But once you get past a very low level of content, like we're talking 15, 16 keys, which for some people, that is ridiculously high. For me, that is not. The problems really start to show. And even folks that don't dig into the class mechanics a lot notice and feel these problems. And they have yet to have been addressed. And they haven't been addressed for years. It's been since what? Antorus? When Bear was at its best with Mark Reversock and stuff like that. Ever since then, it has been the worst tank across the board in almost every single season since then. There was one season where it was good in Season 2 of Shadowlands, and that's because it was a Halls of Atonement specialist. So it really inflated itself in one dungeon in a way that no other tank did. It's time that Blizzard you guys need to sit down and you really need to think about this spec and its long-term health and future. Because the community that plays the spec really wants it to be good. But the fact that it continues to underperform patch after patch after patch after patch drives away people that really like this spec. And the people that don't play this spec get this wrong perception of it that fundamentally sticks around. The problem here is that their perception's correct. They see it as the worst tank, and it has been. And it's time to fix that. Make Guardian good again. MGGA, guys. MGGA. Anyways, guys, that's the end of this video. I appreciate you very much if you stuck around for this 36 minute rant on Guardian Druid. I love the spec to pieces, and I want it to succeed. But I wanted to kind of talk about the state of the Guardian Druid video. And hopefully the 10.1 guide that I'll be making out and I'll be releasing here soon will be more just straight informational. So until the next video, I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you're enjoying yourself. If you're having fun, you keep on gaming, and I will see you all in the next video.